You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech and Future Tech Health Podcast. I have Andrew Feinstein. He's the head of Find Your Mind Meditation, and the website is fymmeditation.com. So, Andrew, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, how did you, come head to head with the world of meditation? What's your background?
Yeah, so it all started in a place that is not very futuristic, the old pen and paper and a book that I read about a few years ago that was a novel called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. And the book had these like undertones of, trying to find your meaning in your life and trying to make sense of, the limited time that we kind of have here on the planet. And I found myself reflected a lot in the character. And when I finished the book, my tangible takeaways were give meditation a try, which was, one of the tools that the main character was using, or try and find a spiritual teacher in a gas station, which is kind of the premise of the novel. And I figured that the first one would be an easier attempt, if you will.
Right. Yeah. Well, what was going on in your life at that point where you feel like you were in need of settling and silence and peace, or were you doing pretty well and happy at that point regardless?
Yeah, no, I think on the surface, I felt like I was supposed to be happy, which I think a lot of people deal with. My life was pretty great. This was back when I was in college, so it was supposed to be kind of the best 4 years of my life. And, I wasn't, I didn't have a lot of bills that I had to pay. I didn't have a lot of stuff that was kind of on the plate. And, I still felt like everything that it was incomplete. And that there was this hole in my life, and I didn't know how to express that, and I didn't feel like I could because I felt like I had to be happier than I actually felt. And I think that the book and then meditation showed me that I can kind of do this work, this self work of being still, of being silent, and learning more about myself and learning about the struggles that I'm going through, and just trying to embrace everything more fully.
I guess people call it a daily practice, right? What their meditation looks like each day.
Definitely. I think, similar to a lot of other things, and this is where I would say the American culture starts to get a little conflated with, the practice is, it's similar to working out. Most of the time, if you start working out, it's not really about getting into some amazing shape, and then all of a sudden you just stop working out. You got to some goal and you're like, okay, I don't need to work out anymore. I think some people in their heads are like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. But, once you undertake something, like a self-betterment practice, it starts to become part of your life. So it's less of, let me achieve X goal, and more of, okay, how am I going to live my life according to these philosophies and these principles every single day? So, if you're talking about going to the gym, it's how am I going to live, a healthier life? If you're talking about, meditation, it could be how am I going to live a life of more self-insight, a life of more self-discovery, a life of, being able to be more still and less reactive to the situations I find myself in. But yes, I would say, it's less of, I do this one time and everything's fixed, and more of, it's a daily practice of trying to better yourself.
Well, I guess it's different for you. It seems like most people that are involved in health that I'd lump meditation into health or mental health, they come from a place where they're having problems and they need to really struggle, and then they find a way to help themselves. But it seems like you were okay and you just added this. But there must have been some driver, right?
Yeah, I think, I like to kind of put it into two different buckets. I think, there's this idea of reactive meditation practices. So meditation practices that come from, feeling some struggle in your life, having, some disease or some sickness or some catastrophe. And, you find this practice as kind of a tool to help you navigate through that. And then there's also proactive, where you take up the tool just because you want to explore it and you want to see what it does. And I think it's when you do that you're able to actually deal with catastrophe when it comes, rather than have to all of a sudden learn a new tool. So, I think for me, it's less about, reacting to my environment and bringing meditation in only when I need it, but more about setting a baseline of, I have a daily practice that helps me feel grounded, that helps me have a place to come back to when my life goes awry and I start to get off, the path of everyday life. And I think that, that insight has been really, really valuable for me.
So how did this morph from your own personal practice into the website and, doing it for others or helping to coach others, I guess? What does it look like now?
Yeah. So it's been a really interesting process. I learned very quickly once I started to meditate that I wanted to share this experience with people. And that's always something that I've wanted to do. I think, when I look at kind of the biggest pain point of our society as we start to, explore all of this new technology and we start to become way more advanced and smarter and closer, is that we all still kind of feel alone. And, I realized quickly when I started to gain insight into myself that, how great would it be if I could better myself amongst others who wanted to do the same thing. And I think, that's why people gravitate towards group fitness classes, because you can, do something with a community of people and you don't feel like you're going through struggle on your own. And I think, that's kind of the key insight I had, is that everybody goes through struggle. It's a matter of, do you want to publicize it and work through it with people and acknowledge it? Or do you want to just kind of fight through it on your own, trying to ignore the difficulty and just trudge through life, working your ass off, even though there's other things that can help you enjoy the moment more. So, after I would say about 2 or 3 months of exploring, meditation really deeply and reading books every day and practicing every day, I realized, that I wanted to share my insights with people my age, so I started to discuss with college age students, these things that a lot of my contemporaries were unaware of. And they, saw meditation as kind of this woo-woo spiritual thing that, was not for them and didn't fit into their religious perspective. And, not a lot of people were recognizing that there's so much more here. And I think, while there are so many apps and companies doing the education component, I found that they were missing this key demographic of, the college age, the young professional, the kid that feels like they need to keep their head down and grind, and that they can't, look up and be still until, they have enough money or enough status to do so. So, for me, I wanted to immediately start teaching these people that, in the struggle, in this keeping your head down and going, that you could actually still enjoy the moment, that you could take the time every morning to, set yourself in a good mindset so that you can actually attack the day more wholly and more fully. And you don't feel like at the end of your day, you need to come home and, crack a beer and watch Netflix and just tune everything out. But rather, you can feel like you're getting the most out of each minute that you are awake and conscious and alive. And this was kind of the inspiration that led me to write and publish my book, which is called Find Your Mind: Meditation for the Bold and Ambitious. It was, after working with a bunch of college age kids and seeing the value that they were getting from this, I said, why can't I put something out there that targets this demographic, that targets the, 18 to 30-year-old, the person who's got their head down and they're just working really hard. And also have it be written by somebody who knows what they're going through, not somebody who's been there before, but somebody who's actively going through it and trying to make the most out of that experience. So I think that was really the journey from, okay, I'm going to just sit, at the end of my bed with my eyes closed and attempt to meditate, to, okay, this can be something that I really spread with the world and actually do for a living.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder what the difference is in someone that's 18, and I guess outside perception is like, oh, they're young and everything's easy and they're fine, everything's easy for them, versus someone that's like 50, 60 meditating, someone that's 50 with kids and a wife and job and all those stresses and everything. Have you worked with people in different ages and in different stages of life in meditation?
Definitely.
And if so, have you observed how is it different for those people?
Yeah, I think the difficult components and why I really felt like, I remember when I first set out to write the book, a lot of people were saying, well, why are you writing a book? There's so much already written in this space. Shouldn't you do something different? And I kind of said, I don't think there's anybody at this age level speaking to their contemporaries. I felt that, and I've worked with people of various age groups, and I feel like, while I can talk about the meditation with anybody, that there's a disconnect on actual life experience. That I feel like, it's harder for me to relate to somebody who has kids and has, a mortgage and has all of these things that, play into the struggle of life that I myself, have not yet experienced. And not to say that kids are a struggle, but, I think that when your life starts to get more complicated, there's a lot more moving pieces that, make you feel like, oh, I couldn't meditate. I can never close my mind. I can never stop thinking. I don't have any quiet spaces in my house. And it's much harder to help people or show people that you understand what they're going through. And that's why I felt, that being able to speak to this age demographic, and I could say like, listen, like I understand everything you're going through. I majored in marketing and finance and spent, the first years out of college working for a real estate property developer as a financial analyst, and, was keeping my head down and was on that path. And, I can relate to the feeling of, oh, I'm getting crushed at work and I have to be here until 2 or 3 a.m. every night. And, I can't find any time to meditate because I can barely find time to sleep. So I felt like I could relate to that experience and I could speak to it, and I could really help people see that even in the midst of, this period of your life where you're working pretty hard, that there's still value to be found in stillness and silence. And I think it was difficult when, I was learning the practice that I had, people that were 50 or 60 telling me, that, oh, I should find the time to sit every morning, and that, how could I not possibly find the time? And I just felt like I couldn't, that I could look at them and be like, you have no idea what I'm going through. You're not my age. And, although that was definitely an excuse for me, I would say, now when I talk with people and they're like, listen, I can't find the time. I'm like, listen, you can't, because I've been there and I found it. And I know that, people can find it. So I think, it really allows me to speak to the actual life experience, which, meditation is not just something that you do every single day as a chore or a task, it starts to become part of your life. So, I think when you can relate to somebody's life, it, helps feel like they actually have something they can offer you.
Well, again, what have you noticed about your own, like, I don't know, how old are you right now and how long have you been meditating? So that's my first.
Yeah. So I'm 23 now, and it's been 5 years. So started kind of, I guess, 17, 18. And yeah, so, I mean, it's been, a very vast journey of trying to amass a lot of knowledge very quickly. And then recognizing that, I'm not an expert by any means of, the people that have been doing this for 20 or 30 years. And I don't pretend that I know more than them. I just like to say that I have a different perspective, and one that I think still adds value to, this larger conversation of self-betterment and, these practices that have started to become very popular in our country.
Yeah, but 5 years of a steady practice, I would say you're probably in the, I don't know, top 5% of all people that meditate already. So what has changed and what have you experienced over the 5 years? Can you put that into words? What's it like now when you meditate? What does it do for you? What do you feel like versus when you started?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing that, comes to mind, and I think something that a lot of people can take away, and this is, a really tangible takeaway, is that I feel less reactive to the world around me. And this is something that, I think when you look at meditation on the surface and what the tool actually is, it's a tool that allows you to go within yourself and take some time to be still. And as thoughts arise, you slowly start to recognize them and then return back to your breathing or to whatever anchor you want to use, if we're talking kind of a mindfulness practice. I think that practice in and of itself and that repetition has allowed me to feel like I can, in real time, go to that place of stillness and decide how I want to react in a situation. So if somebody bumps into you on the street, I think it's a very knee-jerk reaction to get angry. And then often we don't recognize the anger, and then we become angry for the rest of the day without even realizing what caused it. So, somebody bumps into you on the subway and all of a sudden you go home to your significant other or to your roommate and you yell at them because you're pissed off about some tiny little minute interaction that happened in your day. I look at, and I look at the changes in my life and I feel like, I have that happen where, I walked onto the subway yesterday and somebody screamed in my face. I was like, whoa, I live in New York and, there's a lot that happens here where stuff just throws you off of your even keeled, feeling of my day is going great, and all of a sudden something happens and you're like, okay, you decide how you react. You cannot control what other people do within your life, but you can always control how you react. And I feel like, that's been something that I've learned wholeheartedly from the practice. The second thing that I tell people a lot, and I think this one is a little less intuitive and tangible, is that, when you're sitting in that stillness, you get to a feeling of this, peace or this stillness that kind of extends beyond any logical understanding, that there's just a feeling of, I would say it just feels natural. It feels very calm and content. And I think that it's, glimpsing that feeling that has really kept me going because I want more of that.
You must be a good meditator because I grew up in New York and the feeling there is that everyone's amped and it's very fast paced and everything. And when I don't know, I imagine I was going to ask you, have you ever tried to meditate in Grand Central Station, during lunchtime just for the hell of it to see what would it feel like for you to be quiet and centered and all that with thousands of people milling about? It might be a really cool experiment for you to try.
Yeah. So I haven't done Grand Central yet, but I met a friend, who wanted to start the practice today. We met in Washington Square Park earlier this morning to do like a small little session, and we're both sitting there with our eyes closed, back straight. It's hard not to notice when somebody's doing that because I feel like it sticks out like a sore thumb, where you're like, oh, why is this guy sitting up so straight? Like nobody sits like this normally. It's just a cool feeling to know that like you can do this anywhere, that a lot of people actually use the time on the subway or on the bus, the time when they're traveling, because you already can't really do anything. On the subway, there's not really any cell phone service. So it's not like you can get work done, so you might as well take some time to, be still and go inward and see if you can do it, and I know a lot of thought leaders in meditation will say, that if you can't meditate on the subway, then you're not an expert meditator yet, because you should be able to go within yourself no matter what is going on outside of you. And I think, that's very clear when like you are in a place and you start to notice somebody else's conversation, even though you might not have heard it before. There's our brain is able to tune into things and tune out very easily. So it's definitely something that can be done. And I think, scientifically and logically speaking, there are grounds to support that.
Well, earlier when you were saying you're less reactive to situations, some people think that means you're dulled? You're less emotional, or you're less alive, or less happy, or less any of those things because you're
Yeah.
less reactive, or how would you describe it?
Yeah. I think a lot of people have felt that way or worry that that is like what's going to happen to them. I have never heard personally that I am, emotionally dull or that I'm not, in tune with my emotions. But I think people worry like, okay, when I hear this less reactivity, does that mean, that all of a sudden I don't care about anything and I'm just kind of this like lazy, like pillow that just like walks around the world and like does nothing. And I would say it's actually the exact opposite. I think what it allows you to do is it allows you to feel emotions and then decide whether or not you want them to remain or you want to move past them. So, when we kind of went back to somebody bumping into you and you getting angry example, if you decide, all right, that made me angry, but I can choose whether or not I want to carry this anger with me into the next phase of my day, or if I just want to let it go. So I think instead of becoming dull, you just become more aware of the emotions, and then they don't control you, but you actually gain more control over them.
Well, I mean, I've told myself plenty of times to let it go, and I've certainly told my wife that, but sometimes it's very difficult to, and then it's frustrating. So is it that you need meditation does it give you more power to do that, to let things go? Or is there something else that you have to say to yourself or do in order to let things go?
I think, it's really about having something that you can return to in those moments, So for me, if somebody bumps into me on the street, I pause for a minute and I go back to my breathing, and in my meditation practice, a lot of what I do is trying to pay attention to the feelings and sensations of my breath. And then when I get distracted, noticing the distraction and coming back to the breathing. So I think, if we stay on this example, if somebody bumps into me, my go-to will be just to take a step back, to return back to my breathing and, kind of look at the example and be like, all right, how am I feeling right now? That made me angry. Do I want to keep this anger in my system and, be angry for the rest of the day? Or do I want to recognize that, this was an accident and, I can let it go? I think the difference is, and where meditation comes in as value is that in our heads, we say, yeah, we should let things go, but we don't actually like look at the feelings. We don't try and let them go. We just say rationally to ourselves, we should let that go. So I think, the difference is being able to actually be in tune with yourself more fully allows you to see these experiences and see these emotions and decide what you want to do with them, rather than just rationally saying, let it go. And, really you still have that emotion. You're just trying to move on with your day. So I know it sounds kind of conflated and the difference is a little bit subtle. But I think, the challenge with meditation where, the difficult selling point is, if you will, is, unlike a lot of these other things out there, I can't really show you the exact changes. I guess I could hook my brain up to, a monitor and show you that, there are changes that go on within certain regions of the brain. But, most of the science isn't what gets people to meditate. It's less about the hard facts of, okay, this is what'll change for you. It's more about, you just give it a try. You try to meditate and you see, what it does for you, and you try more than once. It's like anything, you wouldn't try something one time and give it up. You wouldn't go to your first day of a new job and be like, okay, I didn't like today, I'm quitting, and I think, like in everything, you just got to put some time in and see if there's value there for you.
Do you have any memories of a really intense situation where your training came to your aid?
I think, if I don't know if I would say really, really intense, but just, everyday arguments with loved ones and family members, where I feel like I'm almost a little bit more removed from the argument, where I feel like I can see it more fully. And I'm not so caught up in, the emotions to not be able to resolve something. I think, for me, I really like making sure that, everything that goes on in my, relationships with people, is said, and, that I don't harbor any feelings against people in my life. And I think that, this is something that, being able to be a little bit more in tune with myself, and, in the midst of an argument, being able to go back to the breathing and be like, okay, do I really want to keep yelling at somebody that I have a lot of love for, or do I want to try and bring this up in a different way? And I think, that has really helped me, in my relationships with, family members and loved ones.
So what are some of the difficulties people have that you work with, maybe ongoing ones that you've had? But like, what are the common things that, stop people from meditating or make it really difficult for them?
Yeah. I would say the biggest one is that even once you commit to it, even once you say, all right, I'm going to give this thing a try, that there's no instant gratification. And I think, we've become a very instantly gratifying society where, you want to talk to somebody and you don't have to send a letter and wait for the response, but you can text them and, odds are they will text right back, or you can call them and talk to them, or you can even FaceTime and, see their face. So I think, we've gotten into this custom of, I want something, it takes me 2 seconds to get it, so I think a lot of people want the feelings that meditators describe, this less reactivity, this stillness, this ability to kind of just be more in tune with yourself. I think everybody would say, yeah, I would love that. But the problem is they do it once and they expect that to happen. And, as we've discussed, I said, I've been doing this for, 5 years now, and that I still feel like, to some extent I'm a beginner, because there are people that have done this, they do this for their whole lives, that it's something that they dedicate their lives to. You have monks that are spending hours and hours every single day, going inward and doing meditative practices. So I think that the biggest difficulty is that you got to realize that the changes are subtle and that they come not immediately, but, gradually. And I think that that's a very difficult thing for us as a society to accept. And I think, it mimics itself in, fitness as well, where, we want to work out and immediately get, the body that we're looking for. And you realize very quickly there as well that, it doesn't come right away. The nice thing about fitness is that you feel amazing, after a really hard workout because of, the actual science behind how dopamine is released in the brain and serotonin is released in the brain, and you feel good. Meditation can be tricky, and when you sit with yourself, oftentimes there are difficulties that come up, like thoughts that you've tried to suppress, feelings and emotions that, you're trying not to think about. When you stop letting your brain be distracted by everyday life and you sit, a lot of that stuff starts to rear itself, into the forefront of your consciousness. And I think that is another difficulty of, where's my gratification? Where's my feeling of relaxation? Where's my peace and my ease and my, ability to be emotionally in tune and less reactive? And, it doesn't come after one session.
So what are some things meditation is good for, in addition to what you said? You said being less reactive, which is good, not letting, big or small things like ruin your day. But
yeah.
What else? What if I'm a procrastinator and I sit down and I try to work, but I get distracted and I'm like, is it helpful there? Will I just naturally procrastinate less? So will I be able to focus on work more? Like, what else have you seen that helps you with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the procrastination is an interesting example. I mean, I know, meditation has kind of become, I don't want to say a cure-all in, the health space, but I think people are saying, that it's got all of these outstanding benefits. And while a lot of them are true and have value and validation, I think it's really, it's an individual and personal experience, so usually, when somebody is procrastinating, they're avoiding something, that either, in my experience, it's been that, there are other feelings and stuff that are going on that, make you want to feel sluggish and lazy and not productive. So, taking a few minutes to just be with yourself and reset and, even, just sitting and feeling your breath can really help you feel more in tune and ready to kind of attack whatever it is that you need to attack, and that's kind of a lot of the philosophy that I lay out in my book, is that it's less about, relaxation and more about just setting you up for, being able to do what you want to do with your life. And when I talk about, kind of doing a practice every morning and, having meditation be part of your morning, it's like every morning you're fueling yourself for the day. If you look at yourself kind of like a machine, which is kind of how the world, looks at us now, that we have to churn out a ton of work and we work ourselves really hard. And, we're basically like, we have to compete with machines for jobs. So, in that sense, if you're going to work really hard and yet every morning what you do is you wake up 10 minutes before you got to go to work and you get dressed really quick and you grab a coffee and you get to the office and, the subway's delayed and you're pissed off that the subway's delayed. And, there's all of this crap that feeds into, your fueling time, then I think it throws you off for your whole day. So where I, talked in the beginning about meditation kind of being a proactive tool, one that you can use, to actually help your life now, even when things are good and you're not dealing with catastrophe, is being able to feel like you have something in the morning that grounds you, that recharges you, that helps you feel like you're ready to take on, a difficult day. And I think, a lot of the science behind that is the same thing, where a lot of people say, making your bed every morning helps you feel like you've accomplished something. And, I would say, a step further that, doing the meditation, in addition to that feeling of accomplishment of, you did something difficult in the morning, is that it really helps you fuel your body and your brain in a way that allows you to make the most out of your day.
Any personal discoveries you feel like you made about meditation that you don't hear commonly? Any, or is it, hey, you've joined the group of meditators out there and yep, the benefits are what they said it would be. And is there any mystery to you, or is it like plain and simple and it just works?
Yeah. I mean, I think for every person, it is a slightly different experience. And, I don't know if I have any like golden nuggets of insight. And, I guess the thing that I've realized is, I used to be the type of person that was very against anything spiritual. And I think, to me, I understood the term spiritual as, kind of like shamans and weird herbs and rituals and all of this stuff. But, now kind of the term really means to me is, how you feel about yourself and your life, and how, you go about maintaining the betterment of yourself and, making sure your life is where you want it to be, not just logistically, but, emotionally as well. I think, to me, that all of that feeling is what encompasses spirituality. And, I think the more that I've been able to embrace that, the more I've been able to learn about myself. And I guess, I talk about, self-insight a lot. And for me, that's really what, my meditation practice is at the moment, is just, the constant growth of comfortability with myself. And I think, taking the time to sit and be with my breath and be with my body and who I am, allows me to just feel more at ease in everything that I do, and more confident in everything that I do. And I think, that's something that has happened for me, and something that I don't hear talked about a lot, but I think, it's a very personal experience. And, I think everybody goes through it differently.
So what is Find Your Mind meditation about? That's what we'll finish with. What are you doing now to work with others?
Yeah. So we do a lot of things. So really where the focus is right now is on actual community building. And, what I realized very quickly, like I said earlier, was that we're all lonely. And, if you go to a monastery, in Asia, it's not just some guy sitting in a cave doing his meditation on his own. And while, that does happen from time to time, and, monks will take, time on their own to actually go deeper within themselves, they also have this community of people going through a similar experience. There are hundreds of them that live in the same place that are working on bettering themselves. And I think that, what we've done here in terms of taking meditation as a tool and making it something that is for, getting a leg up in the world and being better than everyone else. I think that that's kind of a lot of the slant that taken is like, get an edge up basically, and, be more in tune with your mind and be sharper and less reactive. And, I think for me, where I find a lot of passion in the space is bringing people together and making it seem like, this is not just an individual tool. And while, yes, nobody can meditate for you, that you can do it with other people that are also going through a similar experience. And I think that that makes you feel supported. I think that that makes you feel like you can actually continue the practice. So, what we've rolled out recently are, these dinner series where, people come together over food and, they get to experience, meditation in some form and, the beginning of that. And then they get to talk about their life and about their personal experiences. And, you go through this journey of actually feeling like you can connect with other people. And I think, that the prerequisite to that is being able to first connect with yourself. So I see, for me in the future of, what I'm trying to do is really trying to make people feel like there are others out there in the world who understand them and that they also understand themselves. So, we've put a big emphasis on this dinner series and, then kind of the follow up every day is just, anybody who wants to learn meditation is being there as a resource, as a tool, that helps relate to people's experiences and helps them feel like, they actually have somebody that they can talk to. And, a lot of the work that I do is very personal, is very individualized. And I don't, at least right now, plan on having, this huge, large base of, meditation that, you just come to my website and you tune into a meditation, but rather, that you get led one-on-one, that you have, kind of a training that feels, unique to you and that you can talk through the stuff that gets difficult and you can be like, hey, how come I've been doing this for a month and I loved it, but now I don't want to meditate at all. And, you can have somebody say, well, that's actually a very common trend in a lot of people who start meditating, that there's, kind of this downslope right after you start where, you start to lose interest and, talk through things that I think when you download an app now, there's not a lot of space for that. And while I have nothing but admiration for all of the companies spreading meditation, because I do think, even one session can be of value to people and can change somebody's life. I definitely think that there's room to kind of become more personalized and individualized in the space to really help people.
Well, very good. So what are some resources, like if people want to get in contact and maybe if they're local, go for one of the dinner parties, or I don't know if you're setting them up nationally. What are some ways people can engage with you?
Definitely. So the website has everything that people might need, talks about a lot of the stuff that I work on. And the website is fymmeditation.com. And it also has, a contact section that goes directly to my inbox. And, the dinners are in New York City and they're, intimate gatherings that are kind of invite only, but, anybody is at play to be invited. So, any interest in any of that, people are more than welcome to reach out.
That's great. Well, I mean, again, for someone at your age to discover meditation and to do it consistently for so long, it's really cool. It's very unusual. And, it would be interesting to find out. Actually, there's one more question. Have you spoken to anyone that's been meditating for 20, 30, 40 years? And what did they tell you? Anything interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I've had, the good fortune of being able to talk to a lot of people in the space. And, I would encourage any, like all of these people are so accessible and, all it takes is the willingness to put yourself out there and say, hey, I want to talk to somebody in this field, let's just make it happen. So, in my book writing process, I got to talk to a lot of, what people would consider thought leaders in the space. And, I actually asked all of them, what is something that you would say to, your 18 to 30-year-old self? So I guess, really what I was asking is, what advice would you give me? And, I think one of the biggest takeaways that I had was, people saying, just enjoy the moment more and, find the practice earlier and spread this to more people, because that's really all we're trying to do. Is we're trying to have the most enjoyment, the most passion, the most purpose in our lives. And a lot of the people who've been doing this for, 20 or 30 years will tell you that, the amount that they have learned about what they need now versus what they were doing in the past, that if a lot of them could go back, I'm sure that, they would make some drastic changes. And while everyone is, pretty content on where they've ended up, everyone that at least I was speaking to, I definitely had the feeling that, people would have loved to have found meditation earlier, and, just committed to it and felt like, they were actually enjoying every single moment, like a lot of them feel like they are now.
Very good. Well, Andrew, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been a good call.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it a lot.
You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you.